My mother looked across the table at a restaurant full of people, raised her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, and said the words that were supposed to destroy me. "You're a failure, Lena. You dropped out of business school, you've never had a real career, you dress like you shop at thrift stores, and honestly, I'm embarrassed to tell people you're my daughter. You'll never amount to anything." The nearby tables went quiet. My siblings stared at their plates. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. And I just sat there, letting her words hang in the air like they always did, not defending myself, not explaining, just existing in the role she'd assigned me 30 years ago. Then the head waiter walked over to our table, smiled warmly at me, and said 3 words that made my mother's face drain of all color: "Welcome back, boss." The silence that followed was absolutely delicious. Because what my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I owned this restaurant. And the 5 others in the city. And the catering company that employed 200 people. And the food distribution business that supplied half the high-end establishments in the state. She'd spent 20 minutes telling me I was nothing in a building I'd bought with cash 3 years ago. I'm Lena, and this is the story of how my mother publicly humiliated me one too many times and accidentally exposed that she'd been completely wrong about me for my entire adult life. Let me take you back to the beginning of that evening because you need to understand the full context of her cruelty and why that moment was so perfectly karmic. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration for my younger sister's engagement. My mother had chosen the restaurant, naturally, picking the most expensive, exclusive place in the city to show off to her friends and our extended family. I'd received the invitation via a group text. Not a personal call. Not even a direct message. Just a group text that read, "Family dinner Saturday at 7 p.m. at Marcello's. Dress appropriately. This is an upscale establishment." The "dress appropriately" was clearly directed at me, even though my name wasn't mentioned. My mother had been making comments about my appearance for years. I didn't wear designer labels. I didn't get my hair done at expensive salons. I didn't carry the right handbag or wear the right jewelry. I dressed practically because I was usually working, and my work involved being on my feet in restaurant kitchens, meeting with suppliers, checking inventory, managing staff. But my family didn't know that. They didn't know what I did for work because they'd stopped asking years ago after deciding I was a disappointment. I showed up to the restaurant wearing nice pants, a simple blouse, and comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive looking. Exactly the kind of outfit my mother hated. The restaurant was beautiful. I'd worked with the designer myself when we renovated 2 years ago. White tablecloths, soft lighting, live piano music, the smell of fresh bread and herbs. It was the flagship location of my restaurant group, the one I was most proud of. My family was already seated when I arrived. My mother, my father, my 2 siblings and their partners, my aunt and uncle. All of them dressed up like they were attending a gala. My mother took one look at me and her lips thinned in that expression I knew so well. "You couldn't dress up for your sister's engagement dinner?" she asked, not bothering to lower her voice. "This is a special occasion, Lena. The least you could do is make an effort." "It's nice to see you too, Mom," I said, sliding into the empty seat at the end of the table. The seat furthest from the guest of honor, naturally. My sister Emma was showing off her engagement ring to everyone, practically blinding people with the size of the diamond. Her fiancé worked in finance and came from money. The kind of money my mother worshipped. The kind of success she understood and valued. I congratulated Emma genuinely. I was happy for her. We weren't close, but I didn't wish her ill. "Thank you," Emma said, then immediately turned back to showing our aunt the ring. I was dismissed before the conversation even started. That set the tone for the evening. I was physically present but socially invisible, included in the headcount but not in the actual gathering. It was a role I'd played at family events for over a decade. The waiter came to take drink orders. My mother ordered an expensive bottle of wine for the table without consulting anyone. When it arrived and was poured, she raised her glass for a toast. To Emma and David, she said, beaming at my sister. May you build the kind of successful, beautiful life together that makes us all proud. May you achieve everything you set out to achieve, unlike some people who start things and never finish them. Her eyes flicked to me on that last sentence. The implication was clear to everyone at the table. I'd enrolled in business school at 22, right after undergrad. 3 months in, I'd left. Not because I was failing. Not because I couldn't handle it. But because I'd been offered a job as assistant manager at a struggling restaurant by an owner who'd seen potential in me. My mother had been furious. "You're throwing away your future for a waitressing job," she'd screamed. "You'll never be successful without that degree. You'll be serving food to people who actually finished school for the rest of your life." I'd tried to explain that it was a management position, that I was learning the business from the inside, that I had a plan. She wouldn't listen. In her mind, I'd dropped out, and dropouts were failures. End of story. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the next 8 years working my way up in the restaurant industry. I'd gone from assistant manager to general manager. I'd learned every position, from dishwasher to head chef. I'd saved aggressively, invested carefully, and learned everything I could about the business. When I was 30, the owner of the restaurant where I'd been working for 6 years wanted to retire. He offered to sell me the business at a fair price because I'd helped him turn it from failing to thriving. I'd bought it with a combination of my savings, a small business loan, and an investor who believed in my vision. That was 5 years ago. Since then, I'd expanded from 1 restaurant to 6. I'd started a catering company that served corporate events and weddings. I'd launched a food distribution business that supplied restaurants across the state. I employed over 300 people total across all my businesses. I was successful beyond anything my mother had ever imagined for me. I just hadn't told her because she'd stopped asking about my life the day I left business school. As dinner progressed, my mother's comments got sharper. When the menus came, she made a show of telling me, "Order whatever you want, Lena, but maybe stick to the less expensive items. We know money is tight for you." Money wasn't tight. I'd just paid cash for a condo downtown. But I didn't correct her. When my brother talked about his promotion at his law firm, my mother gushed about how proud she was. "That's what success looks like," she said. "Hard work, dedication, finishing what you start." Again, the pointed look at me. When my sister's fiancé mentioned they were looking at houses in an expensive suburb, my mother nearly vibrated with excitement. "That's wonderful. That's the kind of neighborhood successful people live in." Then, turning to me with fake sympathy, "Don't worry, Lena. Maybe someday you'll be able to afford a nice place too. Everyone moves at their own pace." I owned a 3-bedroom condo with a view of the river. But I just nodded and sipped my water. The breaking point came when my aunt asked me, in that patronizing tone people use when they already think they know the answer, "So Lena, what exactly are you doing for work these days? Still in food service?" She said food service the way someone might say garbage collection. Not that there's anything wrong with either profession, but her tone made it clear she considered it beneath our family. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. And this is where she really let loose. "Lena works at restaurants," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "She's been doing that for years. Never finished business school. Never pursued a real career. Just bounces around from one restaurant job to another, barely making ends meet." "Mom, that's not," I started. "Don't interrupt me," she snapped. "I'm answering a question that was asked to you because apparently you can't even articulate what you do for a living." The table was silent. Other diners at nearby tables were definitely listening now. My mother's voice had risen to that pitch that carries across a room. "Do you know what it's like," my mother continued, "to have friends ask me what my daughter does for a living and have to say she works in restaurants? Not owns restaurants. Not manages restaurants. Works in them. At 35 years old. No degree. No career path. No ambition. I have ambition, I said quietly. You just don't see it. Because there's nothing to see. My mother's voice was getting louder. You had every advantage. Good schools. Supportive parents. Opportunities. And you squandered all of it. You dropped out of the one program that could have given you a real future. You've never stuck with anything. You dress like you can't afford decent clothes. You drive a 10-year-old car. You live in who knows where because you've never even invited us to see your home, probably because you're embarrassed by it. I drove a 10-year-old car because it was reliable and I didn't care about impressing people. I hadn't invited them to my home because I knew it would just become another thing for my mother to critique. You're a failure, Lena, my mother said, and the word hung in the air like a slap. You dropped out of business school, you've never had a real career, you dress like you shop at thrift stores, and honestly, I'm embarrassed to tell people you're my daughter. You'll never amount to anything. The nearby tables had gone completely quiet. Everyone was listening now. My mother had made sure of that. My siblings looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My father stared into his wine glass. My aunt and uncle exchanged glances. Nobody defended me. Nobody told her she was being cruel. They just sat there and let her eviscerate me in public. And I sat there and took it. Because I'd been taking it for 15 years. Because fighting with my mother never went anywhere. Because I'd learned that showing her my success would just make her find new ways to diminish it. But apparently, the universe had other plans. I noticed movement in my peripheral vision and turned to see Marcus, my head waiter and general manager of this location, walking toward our table with a warm smile. Marcus had been with me since I'd bought my second restaurant. He was professional, dedicated, and completely unaware of my family dynamics. My mother was still talking, building up steam, when Marcus reached our table. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said politely, his voice cutting through my mother's monologue. My mother turned to him with annoyance. "Yes? What is it?" "We're in the middle of a family conversation." Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, smiling like he always did when I came to check on the restaurant. "Welcome back, boss," he said warmly. "I didn't know you'd be dining with us tonight." If I'd known, I would have prepared your usual table. The silence that fell over our table was profound. You could have heard a pin drop. Hell, you could have heard a feather land on carpet. My mother's face did something I'd never seen before. It went from flushed pink to completely white in the span of about 2 seconds. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out. "Boss?" my brother said, his voice uncertain. "What do you mean, boss?" Marcus looked at my family like he was confused by the question. "Ms. Lena owns this restaurant. And the other 5 in our restaurant group. She's my employer." Is this not a business dinner?" "5 other restaurants," my sister said faintly. 6 total in the restaurant group, Marcus clarified. Plus the catering company and the distribution business. "Is everything all right? Did you need something, Ms. Lena?" Every eye at the table turned to me. My mother looked like she might faint. My father had set down his wine glass and was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. My siblings looked shocked. My aunt's mouth was literally hanging open. Right now, thousands of you are listening to this story about my mother publicly calling me a failure 2 minutes before finding out I'm more successful than she ever imagined, and I bet most of you won't even hit the like button. You're just here for the drama, consuming my pain and humiliation like it's entertainment. You'll watch me describe being emotionally abused in public and then scroll away without engaging at all. That's fine. I'm used to people taking from me without giving back. But if you're different, if this story actually means something to you, prove it. Like this video. Right now. Show me you're not just here to take. "Everything is fine, Marcus," I said calmly. "This is a family dinner. Personal, not business. Could you ask chef to prepare the sea bass special for the table?" And please make sure everyone's wine glasses stay filled. Of course, boss. I'll take care of it personally. Marcus smiled at the rest of the table. Enjoy your evening. And congratulations on your engagement, he said to my sister before walking away. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour but was probably only about 30 seconds. Finally, my mother found her voice. You own this restaurant? Yes. And 5 others? 6 total, yes. And a catering company? And a food distribution business. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She looked like a fish drowning in air. How, when, why didn't you tell us? You never asked, I said simply. You decided 15 years ago that I was a failure because I left business school. You stopped asking about my work. Stopped being interested in my life. You made up a story about who I was and what I did, and nothing I said could change that story. So I stopped trying to change it. But you said you worked in restaurants, my father said weakly. I do work in restaurants. I own them. I'm in them almost every day. I work harder than I've ever worked in my life. I just don't sit in an office or wear a suit, so you assumed I wasn't successful. My brother was doing math in his head, I could tell. 6 restaurants, the catering company. Lena, what are you worth? That's not really relevant to Emma's engagement celebration, is it? I said, taking a sip of water. But my aunt wasn't letting it go. The distribution business too? Don't you supply restaurants all over the state? 3 states, actually. We expanded into Oregon and Nevada last year. My mother made a sound that might have been a gasp or a sob. 3 states. You have businesses in 3 states and you never told us. I tried to tell you, Mom. Years ago. When I bought my first restaurant. Do you remember what you said? She didn't answer. You said, that's nice, dear, let me know when you do something actually impressive. So I stopped telling you things. The food started arriving. The staff was impeccable, as always. They served each course with practiced precision, keeping wine glasses full, clearing plates efficiently, behaving exactly as I'd trained them to. My mother barely touched her food. She kept staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Why do you dress like that if you're so successful? She finally asked, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. She was trying to find something, anything, that confirmed her narrative about me. Because I'm usually in kitchens or meeting with suppliers or checking inventory. I dress for my actual work, not to impress people at social events. The car I drive is reliable and paid off. The condo I live in is beautiful and also paid off. I don't have debt. I don't buy things to prove to other people that I'm successful. I just am successful. Quietly. You should have told us, my mother said, and now there were tears in her eyes. But I felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. These were tears of embarrassment that she'd been wrong. Why? So you could take credit for it? So you could tell your friends that I finally amounted to something? I built this without you. Without your support. Without your belief in me. I did this despite you telling me I was wasting my life. Despite you calling me a failure at every family gathering for 15 years. Despite you being embarrassed by me. I succeeded anyway. My father cleared his throat. Lena, your mother didn't mean. Yes, she did, I interrupted. She meant every word. She's been saying versions of those words to me for over a decade. The only thing that's changed is that now she knows she was wrong, and that's embarrassing for her. The rest of the dinner was awkward. My family asked questions I answered vaguely. How did I get started? Hard work and smart choices. How big was my staff? Big enough. How much revenue did I generate? Enough to live comfortably. I wasn't going to give them details they could use to gossip or brag about. They hadn't earned that information. When the check came, my mother reached for it automatically, probably planning to make some show of generosity. I gently took it from her hand. "This is my restaurant, Mom. You don't pay here." I looked at the total, over $800 for the meal my mother had ordered without asking anyone's preferences, and signed my name. The staff would comp it from my account. As we were leaving, several staff members smiled at me and said goodnight. "Have a good evening, boss. See you tomorrow, Ms. Lena. Thank you for coming in." Each greeting was another nail in the coffin of my mother's narrative about me. In the parking lot, my mother tried one more time. "Lena, can we talk about this? Can we? I think we need to have a conversation about everything." "What's there to talk about, Mom? You told me I was a failure in front of my entire family and half the restaurant." "You were wrong. That's really all there is to it. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. You decided who I was, and you never let facts get in the way of that decision." I walked to my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the car my mother had mocked, the reliable vehicle I'd paid cash for and never had to worry about. I drove away from that parking lot feeling something I hadn't felt in years, vindicated. The next day, my phone blew up. My mother called 17 times. My siblings sent a flurry of texts. My aunt wanted to have lunch. Everyone suddenly wanted to talk to me, to understand my business, to be involved in my life. I ignored most of it. I was busy running my businesses, doing the work I'd been doing all along while they assumed I was a failure. My mother sent a long email about a week after the dinner. It was full of justifications and excuses. She'd thought she was motivating me. She'd been worried about my future. She'd only wanted the best for me. All the usual deflections from someone who couldn't just apologize. Buried in the 5th paragraph was something that might have been an apology if you squinted. "I'm sorry if my words hurt you. I only ever wanted you to be successful. Sorry if my words hurt me. Not sorry for what she said. Sorry if I felt hurt by it. I wanted me to be successful. On her terms. In ways she could understand and brag about." I didn't respond to the email. About a month later, I ran into my sister at a coffee shop. She was with a friend, and when she saw me, she actually looked embarrassed. "Lena. Hey. I've been meaning to call you," she said, which was a lie because her phone worked fine and she'd had my number for 35 years. "Hey, Emma. Congratulations again on your engagement." "Thanks. Listen, I wanted to apologize for that dinner. Mom was really out of line. We all should have said something." "Yes, you should have." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "She feels terrible about it. She talks about it constantly. I think she's really sorry. Then she can say that to me directly instead of sending you to smooth things over. She's afraid you won't listen." "She's probably right." Emma looked at her friend, then back at me. Could we have coffee sometime? I'd like to hear about your businesses. I had no idea you'd done so well for yourself." Nobody did because nobody asked. I bought my coffee and left. I wasn't interested in rebuilding relationships with people who'd only become interested in me once they found out I was successful. 6 months after the dinner, my mother showed up at my condo. I have no idea how she got my address. Probably from my aunt or someone who'd actually bothered to stay in touch with me. She stood in my doorway, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "Your home is beautiful," she said quietly. "Thank you. Can we talk?" "About what?" "About everything. About how wrong I was. About how sorry I am." I almost closed the door. Almost told her it was too late. But something made me step aside and let her in. We sat in my living room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, the one I'd furnished carefully with pieces I loved. "I was wrong about you," my mother said. "Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. It was the first time she'd apologized without qualifiers or excuses. The first time she'd taken full responsibility. "You were more than wrong, Mom. You were cruel. For years. You made me feel worthless at every family gathering. You mocked my choices. You called me a failure. And the only reason you're apologizing now is because you found out I'm successful despite everything you said about me." That's not true. It is true. If I actually was a struggling restaurant worker like you thought, would you be here? Would you be apologizing? Or would you still be telling people you're embarrassed by me? She didn't have an answer for that. "You damaged our relationship, Mom. Probably beyond repair. And I'm not sure I'm interested in fixing it. Because I don't trust that you actually see me differently. I think you just see my success differently. And that's not the same thing." My mother cried. Real tears this time, not the performative ones from the restaurant. But I didn't comfort her. Her pain was a consequence of her own actions, and I'd spent too many years absorbing the pain she caused me to have much sympathy left. She left my condo without the reconciliation she'd come for. And I felt okay about that. That was 2 years ago. My relationship with my mother is cordial now. We're not close. Probably never will be. She comes to major family events, and I'm polite. She stopped making comments about my appearance or my choices. She tells people about my restaurants now, which is its own kind of annoying because she's taking pride in something she actively discouraged. My businesses continue to grow. I just opened my 7th restaurant. The catering company is thriving. The distribution business expanded into 2 more states. I'm successful. Not because of my family's support. Not because of my mother's encouragement. Despite the lack of both. And that night at the restaurant, when Marcus said "Welcome back, boss," and my mother's entire worldview crumbled? That was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Not because I wanted to hurt her. But because I'd spent 15 years being told I'd never amount to anything by someone who had no idea what I was building. She'd humiliated me in public, trying to shame me into being who she wanted me to be. And the universe handed me the perfect response without me having to say a word. I didn't gloat. Didn't rub it in. Didn't make a scene. I just existed as my successful self, and that was enough to prove her wrong. The lesson I learned from all of this isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about knowing your worth independent of other people's perceptions. My mother thought I was a failure. She was wrong. But even if she'd never found out she was wrong, I'd still be successful. Her opinion never changed reality. It just changed how comfortable she felt discussing me with her friends. I built my life for me. For my own satisfaction. For my own vision of success. And when people who doubted me finally see what I've accomplished, their surprise isn't my problem. Their embarrassment at being wrong isn't my responsibility to soothe. My name is Lena. My mother called me a failure in a restaurant I owned. A waiter called me boss and her entire narrative collapsed in real time. And I learned that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's building something so solid that their opinions become irrelevant. I don't need my mother's approval anymore. I haven't needed it for years. But there was something deeply satisfying about her finally seeing me clearly, even if she still doesn't really understand who I am. She sees the restaurants. The businesses. The money. The success she can quantify and explain to her friends. She doesn't see the work. The risk. The courage it took to leave business school and bet on myself. The nights I spent learning to manage staff, balance books, negotiate with suppliers. The failures I pushed through. The fear I worked through. The person I became in the process. But that's okay. Because I see it. And at the end of the day, my opinion of myself is the only one that actually matters. You made it to the end, which means you just spent 30 minutes listening to me describe being publicly humiliated by my own mother and then accidentally vindicated in the most perfect way possible. And I'm willing to bet that most of you, like 80 or 90%, are going to click away without subscribing, without commenting, without doing anything to acknowledge that you were even here. You'll just take this story and move on like it cost you nothing. Just like my mother took my accomplishments for granted until she couldn't anymore. So here's your moment to be better than she was. Subscribe to this channel right now. Leave a comment about a time someone underestimated you or called you a failure. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that other people's opinions don't define them. Or just close the video and prove that you're exactly the kind of person who takes without giving. At least my mother eventually apologized. What's your excuse? Now I want to hear your story. Have you been called a failure by family? Have you built something successful that people didn't know about? Have you had a moment where someone who doubted you finally saw the truth? Tell me in the comments, because sharing these experiences reminds us we're not alone in dealing with people who underestimate us. And subscribe, because I'll keep sharing stories about defying expectations, building success quietly, and learning that the best response to being underestimated is just continuing to build until your work speaks for itself. These stories are for everyone who's been called a failure by someone who should have supported them. For everyone who's been judged by their appearance instead of their accomplishments. For everyone who's learned that success doesn't always look the way people expect it to. You don't owe anyone a performance of success. You don't owe anyone an explanation of your worth. You just owe yourself the commitment to build the life you want, regardless of who believes in you. This is Lena, reminding you that the people who call you a failure are usually measuring you against their own limited understanding of what success looks like. Build anyway. Succeed anyway. And when they finally see what you've been doing all along, you don't owe them anything, not an explanation, not forgiveness, not a relationship. Just keep building. The work speaks for itself eventually.